Hey guys, alright, today we're going to be watching Germany Could Not Win World War II, Part 2 by Potential History, that's his name. Yeah, I know you guys recommended this one. You guys were recommending it a lot after I watched the first one. What most likely is going to happen is me continuing to agree with his points. As I stated in the first one, and as Potential History stated at the end of his argument, is that the amount of changes, the amount of fundamental changes that would have to be made to the Nazi Party itself and to Hitler's rationale in order to change the outcome of World War II is far too great. There's too many things that would have to be changed for it to happen, for it to even be a plausibility that Germany could win. And also, you have to take into account they're fighting three superpowers at the same time. So, and not to mention the German victories on the Eastern Front, as we've been seeing with the videos that I've done in watching Eastery's animated videos of the Eastern Front, what we see is that following the end of 41, the Germans start getting pushed back by the Soviets. So, like, German success in Russia did not last long. They started getting pushed back in 42, within a year or so of the invasion. So, yeah. Anyways, let's see the additional points that he makes. They still can't win.
Excellent work with the German Miss Powell. Here's to hoping better sources will be used in the future. However, our intel has picked up reports of continued resistance in the comment sections. Mentions of Dunkirk and who not to invade widespread. We will be dropping you directly into the comment section with your primary
Oh no, not the comment section. Oh no.
These myths. Be cautious though. Reports indicate that the Wehrabus will be armed with Cold War era memoirs and David Irving books. Godspeed, Lieutenant.
Wait. Oh my god, he actually wrote something. Derailing the incorrect narrative. Some guy's YouTube channel, Wasteland of the Internet, December 14th, 2018. I'm going to fucking read this. He put the time and effort into writing this, so I'm going to read it. Sometimes even the easiest lessons have to be learned twice. 2 videos to learn the lesson that a win is not going to happen. Rather fitting when talking about German loss. Oh, right, pal? Your last mission went fairly well. Good, like ratios and views that we could not possibly have foreseen. However, the comment section was another story. Large pockets of resistance armed with last-ditch resources have been putting up a stiff fight. We have even heard reports of youth being drafted, given a bicycle and a David Irving book, and being sent to knock out an otherwise good thread. We will approach from the north around 10 p.m. Eastern to mitigate the European shitposters from stalling the attack. Yeah, I doubt many people are reading this anymore. If you are still reading, though, thanks for checking out my video. Sorry for the week-long hiatus. It's all good. I'm watching this in 2020. This ended up involving more stuff to look up than I thought it might, and I kept going down rabbit holes as I went, but I hope it's worth the wait. Honestly, that's kind of history, though. You go down one, you start researching something, and you start going down the rabbit holes, man. It's great. The biggest thing I'm looking forward to is the absolute shit show the comment section is going to be again. Did you see the last one? I mean, holy fuck. The threads went on forever, and it was just a chorus of autistic screeching. I live for that kind of thing, pal. Nothing's better than watching people argue over the internet back and forth like they're actually changing each other's opinions. True. Because let's face it, a lot of people enter into historical debates with preconceived notions that they only want backed up, and will just begin shitposting at each other as soon as the narrative is challenged. True. And it's kind of why I don't really respond to certain... I'll respond to certain comments. If you provide a good argument, I will respond. But like, for instance, there have been a couple people that I've had to delete or completely, essentially, ban from the comment section because of the types of things that they have either commented in the way that they argued. And it's just, I'm not going to deal with it. What I try to be here is a bit more positive on the history sort of thing, on the history side of arguments. No attacking, right? No insults. Okay. So yeah. Anyways, let's continue reading. Where did I leave off? And that's one thing I've actually really appreciated my audience for, is that in the comment section of a lot of other videos that didn't really blow up like that one did, often have a lot of great debates and discussions that don't really fall into that trap. As fun as it is to watch on videos that go the way, it's cool to see the community talk to each other and have a good discussion. But I'm certain this one's not going to go that way, and that just kind of comes with the territory of talking about hypotheticals, I guess. True. Yeah, it really does with with what if scenarios. But I can see a lot of the comments already, especially the ones of people who didn't watch the first video, so they're going to bring up things that I addressed in that one as viable options for a German victory and call me dumb for not thinking of it, but I already covered it. Or my favorite type of people who just comment you're wrong and don't give any type of explanation of argument. So true. I had someone comment this once before, and I just deleted them too, because it's like, you're not going to provide any substantive argument, and you're just going to try and be demeaning. No, get out. Just go away. Anyways, this is getting to be just about a page, and that's all I need for this overly elaborate allied assault gag. If you pause the video and read the whole thing, hats off to you, and post something unique in the comments. I don't know, something like, here's why everything you said in this video is wrong, so you blend in with everybody who didn't bother to read but will know. But okay. Sure.
This video is brought to you by Dashlane. Stay secure online and never forget a password again. More on that later. So you may recall around 6 months ago, I made a video about how due to Germany's lacking in the population, industrial, and raw materials sectors, they could not have pulled out a victory in the war they started in 1939. And it sorta got out of hand.
Oh, Jesus.
I think we should read the comments.
Wait, he made this video when this YouTube Rewind came out? Oh boy. By the way, the response to just don't attack the Soviets is, the Soviets were going to attack inevitably. They were.
The other day, as I was reading the comment section there, I found that, along with some people agreeing with me, there were a lot of dissenting opinions of yet more ways that people thought the final victory could be achieved. And I am here today to respond to them. And also probably clear up what I meant at the end of the last video, talking about limited use of alternative history. Here are a few more ways Germany could not have won World War II. One thing I have seen brought up a few times is that if Hitler had not let the British Expeditionary Force get away at Dunkirk, that later the troops could not be used during Operation Overlord and thus no Western Front, with the implication that the German troops could have been sent east to stop the Soviets. This, however, has two problems. Firstly, the BEF was not simply allowed to leave France as this narrative suggests. In Mein Kampf, Hitler does speak highly of the British at times and suggests that they could be a potential ally, but this is clearly without a strong grasp of British culture and political policy, and was always discussed with Germany being above Britain and having them be administrators of the Reich, but only if they could shake their, quote, Jewish influence. Furthermore, he realized that Britain was against his intentions in the East and would become a barrier there. All this being said, by the time of the invasion of France, Britain was definitely an enemy, and Hitler was doing them no favors. So then why Dunkirk? Well, this was an operational failing, not a peaceful gesture. On May 15th, 1940, the Germans broke through the French 2nd and 9th armies and steamed ahead night and day, thanks in part to some tablet boys, towards the coast. Although these gains were good for the Germans, the mechanized forces were quickly running out of supplies and were leaving their flanks exposed, which opened them to being cut off, the result of which could cause ruin for the German plans. It is at this point a nervous Hitler, being counseled by Generals von Kluge and von Rundstedt, gave a halt order to secure the flanks and allow the exhausted panzer divisions to refit. Check out this video by Mark Gurges for more. Upon the halt, our favorite drug-addled flyboy Goering promised the Luftwaffe could destroy the British at Dunkirk, and although he failed, I would hardly call the actions of the Luftwaffe just letting the British go. With thousands being killed, over 200 ships being sunk, over 100 planes shot down, and the loss of all the BEF's equipment, Hitler even realized that the halt was an error and resumed the attack while the evacuation was underway, and it was only successful due to the brave French soldiers that held out until it was complete. But even if he had let them go, there are still more problems asserting that this means a German victory in the war. Britain had to rearm all the soldiers evacuated, which is a huge loss and took some time. This force, when returned to England, was not in any way ready to turn around and invade France, although the troop reserves were good to have if Germany decided to invade. But they were not in fighting condition for a long time. But most importantly, Britain is not the only nation present at D-Day. A combined landing force of American, British, and Canadian forces, along with smaller groups from other countries, landed and fought on the Western Front. Although the troop loss, if Dunkirk had failed, may have limited Britain's number of troops, the United States, having only mobilized about 9% of its population in the course of the war, could have very realistically filled in the gaps as it did in reality with the British equipment losses.
Yes, excellent point. Excellent point. Now, certainly what would have happened had the Germans actually pushed the forces through into Dunkirk and actually wiped them out. Let's say they did. Let's say they somehow, things changed and the Germans moved a heavy amount of forces there to wipe out the surrounded troops at Dunkirk, and none of them escaped, and either they were surrendered and brought into POW camps or they were killed. This would have been a morale hit, but what I think would have happened, just based upon British culture at the time, is that it may have just stiffened their spirits into wanting to resist the Germans, because right, it's like those men fought to fight back the Germans. If we give up to the Germans, then the sacrifices made at Dunkirk, like, this is what a smart politician would do. He would shift that loss into a win to keep the people fighting. And it's probably what something Churchill would have done. He would have been like, yo, we just lost those people at Dunkirk. We can't give up now. Otherwise, their sacrifices made at that beach, at that encirclement, were for nothing. And we can't let those soldiers die for nothing, right? So that at least that's my thought process on what would have happened. So yeah.
But all of this still doesn't take into account where the real war is being fought, in the east. The German army will be decidedly on its back foot after Kursk, and the Soviets have massive offensives planned in 1944 regardless of what the Western Allies do. Would the defeat of Germany have taken longer without the Western Front opening? Of course it would. But by 1944, the Soviets have a decisive upper hand and will...
This is why I love potential history in the videos that he does like this. He argues perfectly. He argues like how you should textbook wise, right? In how you're taught. I don't do it as well as he does most of the time, I'm being honest. What you do when you're making an argument is you provide some of your points, and then you provide the opposing side. You address the opposing side's argument, and you agree with them at one point on something. For instance, here, in which he says, had the Western Front been closed up sooner, Germany would have lasted longer. He admits, yeah, that's the case. They certainly would have lasted longer. He gives them a bone, right? He gives the other side a victory. But he continues in depth more and more on his side. That's how you argue. That's what I love to see.
Push the Germans back to Berlin. So to say the war could have been shifted
I hope
if
I
the British
explained
had 300,000
arguments
fewer
right.
troops ignores the reality of what the Germans were truly up against by 1944.
Before we get into this point, I just want to add, yes, because let's look at it number-wise. I don't know how many people were encircled at Dunkirk, but statistically speaking, the number that would have either been killed and captured in Dunkirk is a fraction of the size of the militaries that would be mobilized in this war, especially the Americans. The Americans, by the end of the war, would not have even reached their peak. They would still be growing following the end of the war. And at the end of the war, they were at, like, 12 million? The British were at a few million, maybe? I'm not sure, I can't remember. So, the sheer number of soldiers, the amount that were encircled at Dunkirk, it's far too small to really make an impact on that number, right? Obviously, in the early days, there was far less people mobilized, but still.
This is another one I saw a lot. just don't invade the Soviet Union, or just don't declare war on the United States. And although these comments are puzzling on the surface, as removing a major combatant redefines what the war is and you are now describing how to win a smaller conflict, there are reasons this doesn't work that are all to do with character motivation and why these things were going to happen unless you fundamentally change who the Germans and Hitler were, and then stray into fiction.
And not only just change who the Germans were, but also the Soviets, and specifically Stalin. Stalin most likely would have invaded Germany no matter what. And I think I've addressed that point in maybe in a previous video. I think I've addressed it before. I think I've said it before. So yeah, the chances of one of these nations not invading the other, right? Because I think it's been a while since I've watched this video. I have watched this video before, but it's been like years. I think I watched this when it first came out, so it's been a while, and I can't remember the arguments that he's made. But Stalin would not have wanted, especially an American-led Europe. So by the time D-Day occurred, or whatever would have happened in which the Allies are pushing back the Germans, Stalin would have invaded so that he could have as much of the peace deal as he could, so that he could avoid as much of a democratically led Europe. And so,
Let's first start with the Soviet Union. If you read Mein Kampf, don't do it, it's not a very good book, or listen to a lot of Hitler's speeches, both in public and in private, he fixates on this idea of Judeo-Bolshevism, which is a rather outdated term that grew out of the idea of a Jewish conspiracy that had created communism, and the two were the biggest evils facing the Aryan nation. There's a whole rabbit hole to go down here with multiple theorists and their ideas, but I'm not going to go into it here. But that's the basic idea, and Hitler subscribed to it. And the result of this is Hitler's main goal being to destroy the Soviet Union and become the savior of the Aryan people in his eyes, and in the process, wiping out millions of subhuman Slavs and resettle the land with Germans. Hitler saw this as his destiny, meaning he was going to do it at some point, and that this fictitious Hitler that would win World War II by not invading the East is just that, fiction. He ceases becoming the Hitler that we know and that existed, and now we're talking about a made-up story. Now, as to why the Soviet Union was invaded when it was, comes down to two things: resources and, frankly, paranoia. Germany, as I outlined in my previous video on this, spent a lot of the war with fairly limited oil resources and knew that it couldn't support this attack any later than June of '41 with all the fuel that the battle over Britain was consuming. And even the trade with the Soviet Union would not make up for this deficit. So the High Command felt they had to go in when they did before the army would not be able to move as they needed to finish the campaign by September, the time in which the High Command figured the Soviet Union would collapse in on itself under the weight of the German attack. And I'll point you to David Stahill again for more information on that. The other aspect was, as I said, paranoia. I've often seen this assertion stated in a different way of don't break the alliance with the Soviet Union, although I wouldn't even frame the German-Soviet non-aggression pact as an alliance in the way you think of with the Axis and Allies. The treaty was much more in the vein of you don't get in our way, we won't get in your way, let's trade some stuff. And it was very uneasy at many points before and during its existence, becoming most volatile during combat between German and Soviet soldiers during the Poland campaign, after the Germans overran the territory that was designated as theirs and moved into territory promised to the Soviets that actually contained oil fields, making it not very subtle what the Germans were trying to do. Both Stalin and Hitler knew that some form of war was coming, just not when and who would start it, but going out of their way for the most part to not provoke it, and they didn't trust each other whatsoever. Now, I'm not implying any kind of Suvorov preventative war type thing. The Soviet Union was refitting and probably wouldn't be ready for a large war until at least mid-1942, but with these two ideologically opposing powers taking territory so quickly right next to each other, it was something that was bound to happen as soon as one of them felt they were in a position to make the first move. By 1941, the Germans felt they were, and they took the opportunity. For more on this, and the German-Soviet clashings in Poland, I'll point you towards Stephen Kotkin's second book in his Stalin series, or this video of him talking about it. The declaration of war on the US is a bit more tricky, especially given that Hitler was aware of the industrial capacity of the nation. However, he saw the US as very internally focused, and figured that it would take them much longer to mobilize than it did. Hitler always planned for war with the United States, as outlined in his second book, written but not published, in 1928, but wanted to put it off until he was ready, often skipping on details about how it would be done. He began to assume that, due to some anti-German sentiments from Roosevelt, the Americans would declare war in 1942, coming to the aid of the Allies like they did in World War I. Piggybacking off the previous statements about the Soviets, he figured he could end the war in the East and turn and fight the West. This feeling ended, though, as the Soviet campaign continued to drag on and 1942 loomed. The German Navy had been asking for war with the United States for some time, as Hitler had been holding them back to not provoke them, knowing that going against the US Navy, the Kriegsmarine would come up lacking. Hitler's solution to this was Japan, which had a large navy that he thought could tie up the Americans until he was done in Russia, then turn westward and save his plan. He constantly reassured the Japanese that Germany would throw in with them if they expanded their territory south into US-held islands. This was among many attempts to get Germany and Japan to fight the same enemy, which also included trying to get Japan to invade the Soviet Union from the east in June. Although Japan kept Hitler in the dark as to when they were going to attack, Hitler was very pleased when they did and immediately lifted all restrictions on his navy to attack US ships, and later declared war a few days later after his foreign minister, Joachim von Ribbentrop, said, "A great power does not allow itself to be declared war upon, it declares war on others." Now, this decision may have been flawed with the hindsight of putting too much faith in the Japanese Navy and underestimating the US's ability to fight on two fronts and mobilize so quickly, but knowing that Hitler did plan to fight the US way back in the 20s, the timing may be bad given what we know now, but it was not something that he was just not going to do, in the same way he was not going to just opt out of invading the Soviet Union.
State minimum car insurance. Click or call 1-800-SAFE-AUTO for a free quote.
Invade. No. No. That can't happen. Germany was not able to obtain air superiority over Britain, let alone the British Navy would destroy the Kriegsmarine. The Kriegsmarine was not big enough to support a naval invasion. Like, you'd need a naval invasion the size of D-Day.
Take the British out before you turn east. As if it was that simple. The Germans tried this. First by attempting to bomb the British into submission, which didn't work, and second by planning the invasion of the British home island in an operation named Sea Lion. This was going to be the amphibious assault that would take Britain out of the war, and plans were drawn up and early preparations were made. But before going through with it, the Germans themselves realized this wasn't going to work and cancelled it. The short answer for why is the Royal Navy and the inability of the Kriegsmarine and Luftwaffe to control the channel. The German Navy would be unable to keep the channel clear of British warships to enable troops and supplies to reach the British coast unless the army's landing was on a very narrow front, resulting in less water needing to be covered. Knowing the coast was going to be heavily defended, the army rejected this plan as they would need a wide landing front so they were not just feeding men into a meat grinder. In short, the Germans did not have the material to carry out a successful landing without it either bogging down and being cut off on the ground or being simply sunk on the way to its destination. In the 70s, the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst wargamed the scenario with conditions favorable to the Germans and came up with the operation being a total failure. Some commenters have gone as far as to suggest using paratroopers to take the British down, but I think you need to only look as far as Crete and Arnhem to see how badly an unsupported airborne operation can go. The Germans would still have to land by sea to resupply them and get relief troops on the ground, and the Royal Navy was too large an obstacle to allow this to happen, even by the Germans' own admission.
Yes. Conclusion and end. Okay.
One
Thought we were going to get another
comment
point.
out of all of them really stood out to me. It began with, if the Nazis weren't Nazis, they would have won. And I think this really speaks to the core of my point.
Yeah.
Alternative history is fun. It makes for good Hoi 4 games. But when really talking about it seriously, it's really hard to come by any academic conclusions outside of a few days of speculation. Because you begin building assumption on assumption on assumption, and before you know it, you have changed the motivations and decision-making patterns of everybody you're talking about. And you are then just writing fan fiction.
This is your brain. This is your brain on
alternative history.
Would Germany have won World War II if the Nazis weren't in power? Maybe. But it's also equally likely they wouldn't have started the war, or joined the Allies, or anything else. If there's no basis in reality to do with the people you are talking about in your assumption, what's the point? Germany decided to start a war that within a little over 2 years would see them taking on 3 superpowers at once, with the resources of most of the world behind them. Add in strategic mistakes and intelligence failures, it paints a very grim picture from the start, regardless of decisions made after the fact. Speaking of intelligence failures, don't let your private information go the way of the German armies. There are plenty of Alan Turings out there looking for information and private data that do not have the same honor and duty to country that the original did. If you're like me, you probably forget.
Oh, you cheeky fucker. He... Oh. Okay, yeah, that's it. Here, we'll end it with, Bean Boodle Cucumber Bottom. Benedict Cumberbatch as Alan Turing. Great video. excellent points and excellent posing of his arguments, and just bringing up his sources and whatnot, all the things that you have to do in order to form a cohesive and strong argument. He did that. He did it all wonderfully. I don't think I have anything to add aside from, yeah, I still agree with him. I agree with all his points more. So yeah, no, Germany could not win, no matter what. Too many things would have to fundamentally change, and those changes that you make would then pretty much not make them, one, the same Germany, two, Hitler would not be the Hitler he was, and they wouldn't be Nazis. Like, there'd be too many things have to change. So yeah, that's going to be the video for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to leave a suggestion down below as to what you'd like to see me react to next. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.